This question belongs to computer organization subject and was asked in grade 1990, and the topic name is modes of transfer. So the question states, state whether the following statements are true or false with reason. The data transfer between memory and I/O devices using programmed I/O is faster than interrupt-driven I/O. We have to tell whether this statement is true or it is false. So suppose we have our CPU and we have an I/O device. So what can be our I/O device? Our I/O device can be a printer, an I/O device can be a keyboard, an I/O device can be a mouse, and etc. So this I/O device wants to communicate with the CPU. It wants to either read some data from the memory, or it wants to write some data or give some instruction to the CPU. So programmed I/O and interrupt driven I/O are two modes through which we can communicate. So what happens in programmed I/O is that suppose we have CPU. So we have a program written over here, and based on this program, CPU will give its time, the processing time to the I/O device, which means the I/O can perform an operation. It will allow the I/O to perform the operation. Now, as we know, CPU is faster. The speed of CPU is very fast, and I/O device speed is very slow. So by the time I/O device will complete the operation, in this case, CPU will just wait and check whether it's ready or not, whether it's done. I/O device will keep performing the operation and it will ask whether it's done or not. And by the time it's not done, I/O device is not done the transfer, CPU will keep on waiting. So as CPU is waiting, so it is basically slow, as the CPU is basically waiting and not able to perform other tasks, so it is slow. And what happens in interrupt driven IO is that interrupt is basically a hardware signal. Suppose we have an IO device like keyboard. So whenever we type, what is happening is that we are giving an interrupt signal to the CPU. We are sending an INTR, which means interrupt signal to the CPU. And then CPU will execute the I will give the basically commands to the IO device based on this interrupt signal, and we basically have a code written over here which tells interrupt service routine, which tells what tasks need to be performed. And for all the time for which the CPU hasn't received any interrupt request, it will keep processing. So its CPU will be busy doing productive work. It will be busy doing productive work, as it will allow the IO device to, as IO device will keep performing its task, CPU will keep performing its task, and when IO device is done, it will just send an interrupt signal. So interrupt based IO is faster. So programmed IO is slow and interrupt IO is faster. And the question is saying the data transfer between memory and IO devices using programmed IO is faster. It is saying programmed IO is faster. It is false, as programmed IO is slower. So answer is option B, false.